After the first Kashmir War fought between the newly born states of India and Pakistan in 1947 to 48, Major Akbar Khan, an army general of Pakistan who had played a key role in the war, was utterly disillusioned by the civilian leadership. While Pakistan had managed to fight India to a stalemate in Kashmir, despite inheriting a little more than one-third of the troops of the British Indian Army, Major General Khan felt that the civilian leadership's decision to accept a ceasefire that left the Kashmir Valley under Indian control was akin to national surrender. Major General Khan, a communist sympathizer, felt that civilians could not be trusted with the fate of this recently dreamed up and newly formed country, which is perennially and existentially under threat from India. Along with 12 other soldiers and a few communists, including famed poet Faiz Ahmad Faiz, he fomented a plot, the Rawalpindi conspiracy, to overthrow the country's first Prime Minister Liaquat Ali Khan. The conspiracy was foiled and a trial ensued, uncomfortably putting the Pakistani army in the hot seat. Major General Khan, along with Faiz, was convicted and sentenced to a long term of imprisonment. The new army chief, Ayub Khan, was furious. In any case, he had been contemptuous of politicians. His attitude towards the civilian leadership can be gauged from the following statement he made when he was posted in East Pakistan about the chief minister of the province, Khwaja Nazimuddin. It was a torture for him to give a decision, he famously said. Nazimuddin, of course, went on to become the Governor General of Pakistan after Jinnah's death. In less than a decade, in 1958, Ayub Khan staged a coup and became the first military dictator of Pakistan, dashing the country's hope for democracy for years to come. Since then, it has been considered a truism that from the outset, Pakistan has been ill-equipped for democratic rule, and that in the Islamic Republic, even when democratic leaders are in power, the de facto rulers sit in Rawalpindi. Days before the Pahalgam attack in Jammu and Kashmir, which led to the warlike situation between India and Pakistan, it was Pakistan's army chief, Asim Munir, who desperately sought to impress upon his countrymen the relevance of the two-nation theory almost 8 decades after the theory brought the two-nation states into existence. While much has been written about the possible explanations for Munir's actions, I explain the paradox of Pakistan's tryst with democracy. Why, despite India and Pakistan's shared civilizational and political histories and genetic, cultural and linguistic heritage, did the latter civilian leadership become subservient to its military rulers? In fact, even before Ayub, in as early as 1951, a civil servant in Pakistan, Ghulam Muhammad, had staged a quasi-coup in Pakistan and become the third Governor General of Pakistan. Trained in the British steel frame ethos, it was in fact Muhammad who appointed Ayub, then the army chief, as the country's defense minister. But why, to use Indian sociologist Shiv Vishwanathan's memorable phrase, did Indians by heart democracy while their Pakistani counterparts barely experienced it? Can the pre-partition history of the Pakistani region of India tell us something about why Pakistan became the direct successor of the colonial legacy of being run by the civil and military bureaucracy and not India? And was there something about the Aligarh movement which actually created Pakistan in a land far away from where its idea was born that probably made the hope for democracy in Pakistan stillborn? Let's try to solve this riddle. First, there's the Punjab factor. For a whole range of historical factors, the tradition of democracy was weak in the region that became Pakistan much before Pakistan was actually created. As argued by political scientist Christoph Jaffrelot in the book The Pakistan Paradox, Instability and Resilience, the whole territory of the Raj did not benefit in the same way from the colonial apprenticeship of democracy. The provinces that would later become the principal components of Pakistan, that is Punjab, Northwest Frontier Province, which is NWFP, and Balochistan, were among the least solidly anchored in this tradition, he says. With its tradition of the bureaucracy-military nexus, Punjab, which went on to become the governmental heartland of Pakistan, embodied better than anyone this mixture of paternalism and autocraticism. But why was that the case? The militarization of Punjab did not begin with its annexation by the British in 1849. The region's pre-colonial history too is fraught with the military theme. As gateway to the subcontinent, Punjab has historically had a geopolitical curse. For centuries, it has been the first to be looted and invaded. From the Persians to the Greeks, from the Turks to the Mongols, most armies or empires other than the British which entered India entered through Punjab. Violence and militarism have thus been seeped in the region's culture. As argued by Tan Tai Yong in The Garrison State, the Military Government and Society in Colonial Punjab, 1849 to 1947, under Ranjit Singh, the Sikh kingdom was a classic example of a regional Indian fiscal military state in which resources generated by a centralized authority were largely devoted to maintaining its military machinery. It was a legacy which continued after the Punjab's annexation by the British, post which the region actually became the military bulwark of the Raj. Firstly, the fear of invasion from the West, especially the Tsarist Russia, the Soviet and the Afghans, through the Punjab was inherited by the British rulers. Arming the region, therefore, was important to safeguarding the empire's territory. Second, as one of the last regions to be annexed by the British, Punjab became a non-regulation province, which is to say that Punjab remained in the hands of colonial administrators way more firmly than other provinces of the empire, which experienced some legislative and political activity. This unique style of administration gave rise to a paternalistic despotism unique to Punjab. Third, as the British faced the unnerving revolt of 1857, when the Bengal regiments had mutinied against the empire, they needed an alternative army to combat the mutiny. The freshly annexed territory of Punjab rose to the occasion and became the sword arm of the Raj for decades to come, serving thereafter as the primary recruiting ground of the Indian army for more than half a century. Such was Punjab's centrality to the British Indian Army that on the eve of the First World War, Punjabis constituted 66% of all cavalrymen, 45% of the infantry, and 87% of the artillery. This, Yong explains, led to the conjunction of the military, civil and political authorities into a unique civil-military regime not replicated anywhere else in British India, nor indeed the empire. After independence, it was this powerful and well-entrenched civil-military alliance that took over the state apparatus and ensured the survival of the moth-eaten and fragile state of Pakistan, he wrote. While the Indian Punjab also inherited this military legacy, the Pakistani Punjab went on to become the governmental heartland of Pakistan, unlike the former, which remained on the periphery of the Indian state. Then there's the difference between the Indian nationalist movement and the movement for Pakistan. Much before they came into being, the decades and years in the lead up to the partition too set the to-be nation states onto divergent paths. The differences between the Indian nationalist movement and the movement for Pakistan are in fact crucial to understand why the two fraternal twin nation states undertook fundamentally different political journeys. Explaining this key difference, Indian historian Mushirul Hasan wrote, and I quote, "While Gandhi walked barefoot to break the salt law and to galvanize the masses by culturally resonant and action-oriented symbols, a pensive and restless Jinnah waited in London to occupy the commanding heights of political leadership in Delhi." That is to say that through the Gandhi-led Indian nationalist movement, which was much older, much broader and much more deeply rooted in the Indian psyche than the Pakistan movement, democratic political processes had already been embedded in the Indian polity. Meanwhile, Jinnah's movement remained elite and isolated from the public imagination until much later. The Congress leadership's authority was institutionalized by the time the Indian independence was won. More importantly, its authority did not just stem from the top rung of leaders like Nehru, but a thick layer of local and regional leaders. As argued by political scientist Philip Oldenburg in the book India, Pakistan and Democracy, Solving the Puzzle of Divergent Paths, by the time it took power in 1947, the Congress had both mass and momentum. The movement for Pakistan was by contrast a political infant. As late as 1945 to 46, Jinnah did not mobilize supporters or develop leaders in the Muslim majority provinces that were to become Pakistan. The Gandhi-directed nationalist movement did, indeed, in stages become significantly a mass movement, explains Oldenburg. There were literally millions of ordinary Indians who became caught up in the national fervour beginning 25 years before independence. The equivalent fervour emerges among most Pakistanis to be only 2 years before independence. But it was not just a question of the age of the nationalist movement, but also one of geography. And this is the third factor on why the two countries had such profoundly divergent paths. Arguably, the most paradoxical or indeed tragic aspect of Pakistan is that the region in which its idea germinated was far away and never included in the region that went on to become Pakistan. That is Aligarh. The idea of Pakistan germinated in the minds of an Urdu-speaking elite of the Aligarh Muslim University. Far from being just a geopolitical fact, this paradox went on to have deep implications for Pakistan linguistically, culturally, psychologically, and of course, politically. One of the most significant historical reasons why Pakistanis could not by heart democracy the way Indians did is because Pakistan's leaders did not belong to the land they sought to rule. To be sure, when the British left, they amassed all real power in the hands of civil servants trained in the steel frame ethos of the colonizers. But in India, the civil servants had been delegitimized due to the over 2-decade-long nationalist movement and had decidedly and undisputedly been subordinated to the nationalist leadership. In Pakistan, the opposite happened. The leaders who emerged from the nationalism of the Pakistan movement were those whose political roots were left behind in the region that was now the Indian nation state. As Urdu-speaking elites of the United Provinces, they neither shared the language nor culture nor, until as late as 1937, the political aspirations of the people they sought to represent. Remember, as late as in the 1937 elections, the Muslim League did very poorly in Punjab, Sindh and the NWFP. All they had in common with them was Islam. But that was not enough. The Urdu-speaking AMU elites who had left most of their supporters back in India had to compete with the Pakistani region's homegrown leaders now. Doing so was, of course, democratically very difficult. As argued by Jaffrelot, the Pakistan paradox was also that the numbers were on the side of the Bengalis, the power in the hands of the Muhajirs, that is the migrants from India, and the army in the hands of Punjabis. Attempts to hold on to their power then were made by the Muhajirs as bureaucrats and not politically elected leaders, thereby strengthening and not weakening the colonial undemocratic systems of administration. As argued by Oldenburg, in India there were no comparable figures to Pakistani civil servants like Chaudhry Muhammad Ali, Ghulam Muhammad or Iskandar Mirza who received formal positions of political power. While in India, the relationship between the nationalist elite and democracy was established early on, in Pakistan in many ways this relationship was stillborn. Fourthly, there was the Jinnah factor. The only politician who could have subordinated the bureaucracy and the army to democratic will was Muhammad Ali Jinnah. But Jinnah, remember, died merely a year after partition. But even while he was alive, Jinnah did not exactly cultivate a democratic tradition in his newly formed country, and that is the fifth factor. A Democrat deep down, Jinnah presided over the creation of a Pakistan perennially under threat from India. Political liberalism was therefore hardly a political priority for him. Tellingly, post-independence, Jinnah chose to become the Governor-General of Pakistan and not its Prime Minister, in contrast to Nehru, thereby setting in place a vice-regal system of rule. Jinnah viewed this office as similar to the British Governors-General who bore the title of Viceroy after 1858. He thereby promoted the authoritarian and centralizing dimension of the British legacy, says Jaffrelot. He also became the President of the Constituent Assembly, an unprecedented concentration of power in the history of the British dominions. Struck by the perpetual fear of insubordination and Indian invasion, the members of the Central Cabinet were handpicked by the Quaid-e-Azam himself. Even then, he was authorized to overrule the Cabinet's decisions. On one hand, the Muslim League was seen as the only political organization which represented the interests of the nation. As Liaquat Ali Khan, the Prime Minister, said, Pakistan was the child of the Muslim League. Those who joined other political movements were enemies of Pakistan who aimed to destroy the unity of the people. But on the other hand, the Muslim League itself was crippled. In February 1948, Jinnah had decided that no party cadre could be minister in the cabinet. The divisive party spirit, he worried, could contaminate the state apparatus, thereby thwarting whatever little potential for democratic politics that was left in the country. At the same time, militarily protecting the boundaries of the new nation continued to be the major preoccupation of the country, thereby securing for the military a central place in the political imagination of Pakistan. As journalist and former Pakistani ambassador to the United States, Hussain Haqqani says the fact that Pakistan inherited 1/6 of pre-independence India's economy and 1/3 of its army also meant that the military was perpetually justifying its disproportionate size to Pakistanis. Therefore, it is no surprise that despite Ayub Khan's obvious contempt for civilian political leadership, on his appointment as the first native army chief of Pakistan, Liaquat Ali proudly declared, after nearly 200 years, a Muslim army in the subcontinent would have a Muslim commander-in-chief. Liaquat came to greatly rely on him. On paper, Liaquat kept the defense portfolio with himself, again underscoring the centrality of the military in the political imagination of the Pakistani leadership. But, given his responsibilities as the Prime Minister and towards his party, he could not devote his undivided attention to the Ministry of Defense. He thus ended up giving Ayub more freedom than he wanted to. However, even this on-paper division of powers ended as Ghulam Muhammad, a civil servant, became the Governor-General in 1951 and made Ayub the Defense Minister. By the early 1950s then, the nexus of the civil servants and the army, which held political processes in contempt, was already firmly in power in Pakistan. Pakistani politician Aizaz Ahsan once remarked, "The question often asked is, how did the civil and military bureaucracy wrest powers from the politicians at the very outset of Pakistan's creation? The answer," he says, "has to be that it never relinquished it." You can also read this article on theprint.in. Thank you so much for watching.